Okay, so I'll try and go quickly and catch back up some time. I have far too many slides, but I always do. Um, uh, the the problem here, of course, is that you're really a self-selecting audience who probably already knows all this. I know Susan certainly does, because you're interested in digital humanities sustainability. If I have a thesis here, then it's that we should start from a standpoint that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. So let's plan for the fact that we'll fail in many ways, and especially plan for the necessity that our projects will one day, in one way or another, end. So what we promise funders in order to receive funding is that DH projects, any of the technological developments that they'll build will not only solve the issues for that project, but will be built in such a general way that it will solve those problems for all future projects for all time. This is, of course, ridiculous. There usually isn't time and resource. And indeed, if we do put that extra effort in, sometimes that means, seems to mean it will never be used by others. And it's only when we make some quick workaround hack that it seems to stand the test of time and become a crucial part in ongoing infrastructure. As so much resource is devoted to technical development and maintenance, I've suggested before that maybe decoupling project development from institutional projects and employing separate research software engineer teams across multiple projects paid directly from the funding body to craft more generalized solutions might be better. But that, of course, has its own problems as well. If we think about the technical fragility that our projects have. It's sad but true that much crucial open source softwares supported by enthusiastic lone maintainers, or even when a team, a fairly small one, with a vested interest in that code. It's almost inevitable that this will need continual updates as operating systems and software and formats that interact with it develop over time. A lot of digital humanities sustainability then is planning for the inevitable maintenance burden that Christian mentioned and Ariana mentioned, that this technical fragility creates as time progresses. But that there are also other costs, such as the ongoing storage, etc. So if we think about the technical debt that we accrue. This is the implied cost of future reworking required when choosing an easy but limited solution instead of a better approach that could take more time. But pressure on resources, time, and money often mean that DH developers will take shortcuts. We have to. That JavaScript library that creates the WYSI interface for you that you don't totally understand all of the options for, or that off-the-shelf solution, which is a proprietary black box and works fine, but you have some worry that it's going to need constant, expensive upgrades. At some point, our chickens will come home to roost, and this means that we'll need to sort out whatever problems those shortcuts have created, and which now exist solely because we weren't able to devote enough time to them in the beginning. The maintenance cycles of digital humanities and digital humanities sustainability, at least on the technical side, is often predicated then on ongoing funding, resource to maintain the software, and when that new security patch is released, or when the operating system is updated, or when the underlying standards change. And as Ariana sort of alluded to, this can sort of frustrate the long-term preservation aims and the research software engineers involved, because they don't necessarily enjoy fixing code every couple of years and might prefer a more straightforward approach. And are there other options? Well, some research software engineers and others fed up with this continual cycle seem to think so, and they and several others at the University of Victoria helped create the Endings project, which many of you, I hope, have heard of. the project at University of Victoria, led by many excellent people there, looked at how digital humanities projects end and how it's possible to make them sustainable. And one of the reasons for doing this is to avoid the sort of digital dark ages that the lack of preservable, sustainable DH resources may cause. We don't want to be looking back 50 years from now at this period in digital humanities and earlier and going, this was a period of incnabula where everybody was doing different things and oh, look, all of those projects have disappeared. Whenever anybody does a study on funded digital humanities projects, decades on from when they've been funded, we find a large percentage of them have disappeared, and often even the data isn't available. So one of the main outputs from the Endings project was the Endings Principles for Digital Longevity, where they consider data, documentation, processing, products, and release management as key things that we should think about. Don't worry, I'm not going to read you all the points, but I thought I might just pick out some of the ones that I feel are the most important. With data, it's things like version control. Of course, we all do that now, right? But we didn't a decade ago, and there's still occasionally bad practice we encounter of, people keeping things on hard drives or other issues. And of course, open international standards. Now, my background is in doing lots of work with the Text Encoding Initiative. And I forever discover people inventing their own formats rather than using the tools available to just customize the existing framework or seek help that way. With documentation, we should all document how our systems work, not only the user-facing documentation, but the underlying documentation for that research software engineer who's going to have to set up your system again, 3 years after you've retired. Sadly, a lot of that documentation tends not to exist. But this also includes how your outputs are licensed, and generally open licensing and open releasing helps with the potential for sustainability. I think we can probably all just see how that's the case. With processing of data is also important and should be subject to version of control, of course. That's the normal way we do things now in terms of the creation of software. Maybe less so in the creation of data, and we should try and ensure that our projects do that. Data and code should be relentlessly validated. So if something fails, you know that before it's published. You can't publish it if it's broken in some way. And although research software engineers might dispute it, the idea that code is contingent. While it too should be preserved where possible, it's the data and other products that should be the focus of our long-term preservation and sustainability planning. Speaking about those products, the products for outputs are generally the most important, and here the principles suggest that wherever feasible, we should avoid dependence on server-side software. That is difficult for a lot of research software engineers to swallow. This means lots of static, pre-generated, massively redundant websites that increases the storage cost but reduces the maintenance burden. The one that developers also don't like is the no boutique or fashionable technologies. These are precisely those that are going to cause that technical debt and maintenance spikes in the future. But it makes their lives easier. So there's obviously a tension between that. Other things like not having URLs with complex query strings, but instead simple, unique URIs to pages that are human hackable and are generally considered best practice these days anyway, and I hope most people do those. I'd already mentioned massive redundancy and having all the possible content and components one needs with every page. So that means that the page continues to function without need to refer to any other objects or to grab stuff from online. This is obviously a view of a site, perhaps. It might not be the way most people interact with it, but perhaps an export that will function even offline or stored on a USB key or something like that. And graceful failure. We used to talk a lot about that in the early days of the web, and with the invention of JavaScript, it was, oh no, you're going to have your HTML and you're going to have your JavaScript on top of it. But if the JavaScript is turned off, the site still functions underneath. That's almost never the case anymore. And we really should try to make sure the crucial aspects of the site function if JavaScript and CSS isn't present. But the principles aren't this one size fits all kind of doctrine. There are concessions. One can take such an endings compliant site and then enhance it with additional aspects, or there may be the need for external libraries to undertake work that's far too complex to be coded locally. And finishing soon, the release management should be periodic rolling releases, but carefully planned, like editions of books, and only when the product set is coherent. I mean, complete, but not necessarily, you have to wait until you have all of your data finally complete, but coherent and complete in the sense of passing all validation and diagnostic tests. And of course, you should provide details on citation as well, so that end users can cite and unambiguously not only the resource as a whole, but any specific page on it. This is a topic that I've explored in a number of articles and things. And so if you want to see some more thoughts on this, especially related to the Text Encoding Initiative, I have an article in Digital Humanities Quarterly with the issue that the Endings Project produced articles for, called Academics Retire and Servers Die, partly looking at the fact that the reverse is true in some of the projects I've worked on, and how the Endings Project's principles for digital longevity, if they had existed 20 years ago, might have helped me avoid some of these pitfalls. Thank you.